before you rent to own, you want to watch this video. Hey. Shannon Payton here from eXp Realty. And one topic that I find that keeps coming up time and time again for real estate services is, well, what about rent to own? I'm like, what about it? What about rent to own? And my next question always, every time is, you have credit issues? And then I get this, well, it's not that I got credit issues, but, I'm working on some stuff. Okay, just say yes. just say yes. Because if you're asking about rent to own, 9 times out of 10, you got credit issues. There's no reason why you would otherwise be asking for rent to own. Own it. It's okay. It's okay to have credit issues. The thing is it's not okay to have credit issues if you know that you want to achieve some things with your credit and you're unwilling to do the work. So if you are not familiar with the term rent to own, or what rent to own means is you want to rent a home with the intent to own it. You have an agreement with the owner of that home that you are going to rent the home to own it. So it's not a thing like where you're just kind of manifesting it out there in the air. It is an actual term that is used in real estate when you want to rent a home to own it. Every house is not like that. Okay. So here's the biggest things and the biggest takeaways if you're going to do rent to own. Number one, you want to make sure that there's an agreement in writing that's mutually agreed upon between the seller and the buyer. So this is going to work both ways, whether you're the person who wants to do the rent to own, meaning you're the seller who owns the home, or you're the buyer who is trying to do the rent to own. Okay. So what you have to understand is that when you're looking at the rent to own, and I'm going to try to be as neutral as possible to this because I'm going to try my best to be as neutral as possible to this. I'm going to tell you the facts and you can make the decision from there. Okay. So what we're going to focus on is what rent to own is and what you can expect if you choose to utilize the rent to own process. Okay. Cause I don't, again, okay. Doing my best. Okay. Doing my best. So you want to make sure that there's an agreement. More than likely, the agreement is going to cover a couple of things. Who the terms of the agreement are between. So who the owner is and who the buyer is, okay? It's going to cover how much the down payment is going to be to participate in the rent to own option. It's also going to cover the leasing terms or the dates, the timestamps, the expectations of what you can expect when participating in rent to own. So what the seller can expect as far as when the rent will be paid, is going to go into detail about what happens if the buyer does not pay the rent. It's going to go into details of how the deposit is applied and what should happen if the buyer or tenant, okay, misses a payment or if they're late for a payment while underneath this agreement. Okay, it's going to cover the terms. How long is this agreement? It's going to cover the address. What house or what property is this agreement in reference to? Okay. If this agreement doesn't cover all those things, be concerned. And it's going to cover an out. Whether you're a seller or buyer, it's going to cover an out. Every real estate contract has an out. Meaning, what do we do if? What if I get into this rent to own as a seller because I'm thinking that this is what I want to do because I took a new job and I have to come back? What happens if I'm the buyer and I participated in this rent to own and after living here, I'm not feeling it? This ain't really what I wanted to do. Okay. So it's going to cover those different clauses like that. So you want to, make sure you have an agreement in place. Y'all taking notes? Make sure you have an agreement in place if you're not. 2, it's going to include some things to think about is when you are doing the rent to own, typically what it's going to require is a deposit to be submitted on the home before you take possession as a buyer. This is going to do 2 things in most instances. That deposit would be considered the deposit as if you were doing seller financing, because that's technically what this is. Seller financing, if you don't know, is when the seller is where you're being financed through the seller, or you're paying the seller the financing on the property as opposed to going through a bank. So rent to own can work two ways. You can either do seller financing, where the seller is your financer, meaning you're paying the deposit and then you're paying them each month what the rent is. And typically that rent is going to include an amount over that amount to go into an escrow. Now, escrow, so what escrow is escrow in this instance is where it's like a savings account. So let's say we're going to use $1,000 because y'all know that's my favorite easy number. Let's say that you're paying $1,000 for the base rent, but in the agreement, you agreed to pay an additional $300 to go towards escrow. That $300 is going to go into the escrow, and that escrow is going to be that savings account that holds that $300 is going to go into an escrow account, which is going to save you money. Going to be like a savings account, rather. And that $300 that's going into the escrow account, yes, okay, is going to be used for your down payment because you're doing owner-seller's financing. Got it? Now, the deposit that I spoke about in the beginning is we just need to make sure that this deal is gonna be good. So in order for me to consider this deal from you, buyer, we're going to require a deposit. Some people, I've heard, some people that deposit's like 10 grand. Sometimes it's 5. I've even heard people do it even more modestly at maybe 2 times the actual rent. So it varies. So that's something else that'll be specified, okay? So what will happen is as you're living and as you're paying, that money is going to continue to grow in that escrow account for however long. So let's say you're doing a 3-year, because I have heard of people doing a 3-year rent to own. Let's say you're doing a 3-year rent to own. 3-year rent to own, that's 36 months times 3, $10,800. So at the end of that term, that money will be used towards your down payment, so that you can continue to finance the house. Now, and at that point, you might choose to go FHA financing or USDA financing. So you'll be able to use that money to go towards it. FHA doesn't require a down payment, but that's something that you can do still to buy down the loan if for some reason you can't. See, this is the part about things that, make it what it is. Post your questions below because I'm sure you have them. All right. So there's that. Now, in some, not all, in some, if this works, it works in that time, in that 3 years, in that 36 months, the buyer is expected to continue to pay these bills to maintain the home, and that money's still going to be going into the escrow. But you mustn't forget that the whole purpose of the rent to own is not for the seller to continue to finance you after you've hit qualification point. Meaning the purpose of the rent to own is to give you time to qualify while you live in a home that you intend to buy. So typically you're not going to come out of this and be like, oh, I changed my mind. Remember I said every contract has an out. Those are the things that you want to make sure are specified in that contract. If there is an out, if you should decide that this house sucks, I don't want to do it. That's where you want to go into getting things like, okay, well, the contingency on this, meaning before I go into NL, so we are clear, I am not an attorney and I am not here to give you legal advice. I'm just using common sense as an agent. This is what I would be thinking. That you want to cover yourself to make sure that you have a home inspection or something to verify that you know that the condition of this house is decent. And before you go to close on the house, period, hire an attorney to review the contract for you. I'm not an attorney. Hire an attorney to review the contract for you. This is for educational purposes only, but to make sure that you're informed. Okay? Informed. All right? I'm informing you. Okay. So the purpose of that 36 months is to take that time to get your credit together. And what typically happens with people when they're experiencing credit issues is they forget. I don't know how, but they forget. Everything's going good. I forgot I got bad credit. What? How? Where, Sway? Tell me how and where. Okay? So make sure that you're working on your credit. Make sure you're doing the necessary steps to pay down your debt, that you are utilizing your credit accounts well. Focus on making sure that if you have student loans, that they're in good standing. the little things that you could do to work on that. So as a recap, because I feel like I need to do this, because if you know me in real life, or as you get to know me, sometimes I can have a bit of a squirrel personality because there's so much information that I want to share. Rent to own is an option where you rent a place with the intent to own it. It's going to come with terms and conditions, which hopefully are laid out in contract. The purpose of the rent to own is you are renting to own because 9 times out of 10, you have credit issues. In the time of that term, you should be working on your credit, but as you are paying, you're paying a what? Deposit, so that you can have a mutually beneficial relationship between buyer and seller, okay, which holds everybody to terms. And as you're paying your rent, you're paying the rent with a little bit on top to go inside of an escrow account to save for the down payment, so that at the end of that 36-month term, in this instance, it could be a year, it could be 18 months, we don't know, whatever the terms are. Again, get an attorney, okay? At the end of that term, you'll have the money from the escrow, because that's your escrow account. You'll have the money from the escrow, and you can use that to obtain the financing that you truly need, as opposed to sticking with seller financing, okay? So hopefully you guys found value in this, and that I gave you some of the most neutral, unbiased explanation of what a rent-to-own option is. Again, my name is Shannon Payton. I am a realtor with eXp Realty and owner of Payton Credit Services, where we believe in educating consumers for better decision making. So make sure that you follow me if you want to continue to learn these things. Share, comment below, because I like to talk to you guys. Turn on the notification bell so you guys can be up to date when I post these things. Join me next week, and we are going to continue to share and grow from here. Thanks.